One summer night when I was around 5 years old, my sister 8 at the time, and I awoke to hear, through our open bedroom window, my parents yelling loudly on the back patio. This was not a common occurrence, and when they did fight, it was not typically anywhere that was a chance of us hearing. But this sort of thing happened from time to time, and though the situation was mildly unusual, we shrugged it off, shut the window, and went back to sleep. We promptly forgot about the ordeal. It wasn't until years later that we learned the truth about the yelling. As a near adult, I overheard my mother explain the situation to a family member in another room. I'm a little fuzzy on the details as this all occurred long ago, but this is the gist of it. Apparently, at some point in the night after my sister and I went to bed, my parents received an unusual phone call from somebody using an electronic interpreter. The same type of technology a person who is deaf might use to make calls and communicate over the phone. I'm unsure how this technology works exactly, so please excuse my lack of knowledge on this topic. Understandably, my parents were a little surprised because we didn't know anyone who would use this service to contact us, but either way, they accepted the call. I'm not sure how the person on the other line introduced themselves or if they even did at all, but they knew the full names of everybody in my family, which was immediately very creepy and alarming. Conversation began to escalate as the person on the other end of the phone very specifically explained what our house looked like and told my parents they were hiding somewhere in our backyard, which was large, dark, and full of all kinds of plants and trees that made it hard to clearly see. There were too many places to look, and at this point, the tormentor made it clear that they had intentions of entering our home and dismembering my sister and me. At this point, understandably, they were beginning to become frantic. There was a chance that nobody was out there and this was just some kind of cruel joke, but that notion was not worth the risk of believing. My dad asked if they were really where they said they were. What were my parents doing at that very moment then? What were they wearing? And just like that, this infection of a human on the other end of the line explained exactly what my father was doing, which was waving his middle finger in the air. Exactly what they were wearing, where certain things on our patio were placed, the expression on my mom's face, and every other detail. My dad, a rough guy with a heart of gold, charged into the night ready to kill any person he encountered. Neither of my parents had cell phones. I don't think they were even a thing at this time, so my mom took the phone, which had finally been put down by my dad, and called the cops. As brave and stupid as my dad was for venturing into the dark that night, he found nothing, and when the cops showed up soon after, they found nothing too. The police were not able to trace the call because of the electronic interpreter, which they said was a common device used by people trying to anonymously harass others over the phone. Nothing ever came of this incident, and as I said, I was not told about it until at least a decade after it happened. Was this the work of a former friend/enemy trying to play some kind of cruel joke? Was there an actual murderer in my backyard? We will never know. This happened about 5 years ago after my fiance and I had been living in our house for a little over a year. I'm 6 feet tall and about 225 pounds. I've always been naturally muscular and am told I have a very intimidating demeanor. My fiance is 5'2" and weighs maybe 130 pounds. Our house is a bi-level home where you walk in the front door and there are 2 half staircases going up to the living room or down to the basement. The only access to our backyard is through the sliding glass door in the upstairs living room and down the stairs from our deck. During this time I partied a lot, like way more than I should have. I was between jobs and it was toward the end of the holidays, so my interest in finding a new job wasn't quite what it should have been. Many of these nights I was not partying, I would end up just crashing with my friends, which meant my fiance spent many nights alone with our 3 dogs. I had a serious problem with substance abuse, primarily alcohol, and I'm sad to say I was letting it get the better of me. Fast forward a couple of months and I had just found a new job that had random drug and alcohol tests. I had been sober all of 2 days and had begun repairing my relationship with my fiance when she told me how glad she was that I was sleeping at home again. I thought nothing of it and kissed her on the head and told her I was too and that I loved her. Later that night, my fiance and I were watching TV downstairs when I thought I heard something moving in our backyard. The dogs heard it too, but I dismissed it because they just perked up their ears but didn't seem too alarmed. A moment later, I hear the noise again and my fiance very quickly mutes the TV and gives me a very nervous look. "Did you hear that?" she asked, looking very uncomfortable. I told her it's probably just a few of the neighborhood cats playing in our bushes, as there are quite a few outdoor cats living in the area, but she shook her head and began insisting that this wasn't the case. Before I could even ask her what made her so sure, I heard our sliding glass door upstairs fly open. All 3 of my Great Danes and I are on our feet in an instant. The dogs let out the most ferocious sounding barks I have ever heard and tore ass up the stairs with me right behind them. As I'm rounding the first set of stairs and the dogs are reaching the top of the second set, I see the sliding glass door slam closed and the silhouette of a man running away. I get to the door and fling it open, and the dogs shove me out of the way to chase after this would-be intruder. I grab my flashlight, one of those big 4D cell mag lights that cops carry, and run out into the yard. I had just made it down the deck stairs when I saw the dogs freaking out at the back fence. I sprint over and jump the fence just in time to see the man reaching the opposite fence and trying to get over it. He was covered head to toe in black clothing, a thick black hoodie with the hood pulled tight to conceal his face, and jet black cargo pants. Without any regard for my personal safety, I charge the man and just barely miss getting a hold of him as he makes it over the fence. Once more, I follow him over and come around the front of my neighbor's house just in time to see him hop into an old beaten pickup and speed off. I watch for a moment as he tears out of the neighborhood and disappears into the night. I run back home as fast as I can to check on my fiancée and make sure she's okay. When I walk into the house, she was sitting in the upstairs living room, surrounded by all 3 of our Great Danes and clutching the biggest knife we own. She was visibly shaken, but ultimately, she's a very strong woman and told me she was ready in case I got in trouble. After calling the cops, giving statements, and triple checking to make sure every door and window in the house was locked up tight, we decided to watch another movie as neither of us was tired after the adrenaline rush that we had just been through. During the movie, I asked her what made her so sure before that it wasn't just cats playing in our yard. What she told me was enough for me to decide it was time to change my whole life. She said that for about a month now, she had been hearing strange noises coming from all around the house late at night. She would hear footsteps outside and occasionally what sounded like whispering. When I asked her why she never told anyone, she just shook her head and said she didn't know. After hearing this, I came to the realization that whoever this man was, he knew that I was never home at night and that my fiancée essentially was all alone most of the time. Fortunately for us, he somehow missed the fact that we have 3 Great Danes, and for whatever reason, on this night, he decided not to check and make sure she was alone again. These events took place over a couple of months. It still haunts me to this day and is a lot of the reason of why I am the way I am. A little backstory. I have 5 siblings, so 6 of us in total. When this happened, my oldest brother was 14, so I would have been about 3 at the time, given we are around 11 years apart. I'm the baby of the family. This happened at a very fragile time of my parents' marriage. My dad definitely wasn't the best father and had cheated on my mother a number of times. For the record, I've asked my siblings to write this since they are older, but nobody has, so I'll recount it to the best of my ability. There was so much more that happened, but I will talk about 3 occurrences that stuck with me. I was eating something with my sister, watching TV with her at night and the rest of my siblings. My parents weren't home. We only had 1 car at the time, and my mom had to go pick my dad up and leave us at home sometimes. I remember going to the kitchen to throw something away with my sister. We had a big window in the kitchen, and the garbage was right beside it. My sister screamed, and we both noticed a man's face pressed up against the glass, looking in at us with a flashlight and smiling. We both ran to the other room to tell the rest of my siblings. We all quickly stopped watching TV and stayed together upstairs. My mother soon got home, and we told her what happened. She flipped out and called the cops, and also told my neighbors to keep an eye out. This happened a number of times and turned out to be multiple men. They always seemed to get away right before the cops got to us, or right before my mom got home. I remember her cutting down the bushes in front of our house because these men would hide in them. I also remember them breaking one of the windows in our kitchen at one point. On a separate night, I remember being alone with my 1 brother and 1 sister closest in age to me. They would have been 4 and 6. I don't know why we were alone, but I remember it distinctly. The men came back and were pounding on our front door and throwing things at our windows. All 3 of us ran to my parents' room upstairs and locked the door. I remember crying with my sister and my brother telling us not to cry, that we could pretend to be other people, brave people, so that we wouldn't be scared anymore. It definitely worked, and my parents got home soon after. We were literally on lockdown at this point, and I was terrified of everyone. My brother tells me one night that the phone rang right when my mom had left to get my dad, and he answered, and it was one of the men, and he laughed and said, "You people are stupid," and hung up. One of the last nights that this went on, I remember being in bed and my sister waking me up and taking me with her to the landing of our stairs. Our stairs faced our front door, and my brother was sitting on the landing, pointing a shotgun at the front door, and all of my siblings were huddled beside him. I don't know what was happening, or even really what a gun was, but I knew whatever was happening was really bad. I sat down next to my siblings and nobody talked. I remember having a very stupid T-Rex toy I was playing with. It was as if time had stood still. But then there it was. The men were banging on our front door and yelling things outside. I don't know why or if the men had done it, but our front door was unlocked. It felt like forever when my brother finally spoke, and all he said was, "Come in," while pointing his shotgun. All the sounds stopped and we waited, but nobody came through the door. My parents got home soon after, and my dad actually caught one of them and beat the living shit out of the guy. The cops came soon after all of this and told us they had news. Apparently our phone lines were being tapped. That's how the guys always knew when we were alone at the house. I don't know if the cops knew or charged any of these men with anything. And my mom doesn't like talking about it because she's a different person than she was 20 years ago. Now that I'm older, I realize we never should have been left alone at the time, period. But my mom was not well. She was madly in love with my dad and was obsessed with making sure he wasn't cheating. A lot of the time that this was going on, she wasn't picking him up. She was watching him at work and making sure he wasn't cheating, all while leaving the 6 of us alone to fend for ourselves. I realize how insanely selfish this is, but I've forgiven my mom for it. She's still with my dad, and I'm working on a better relationship with both of them. Looking back, it doesn't even feel real. After all, we found out all of this happened from a psycho bitch my dad cheated with who got her loser middle-aged friends to terrorize a bunch of children. For the record, I found this woman and sent her the nastiest message a few years ago when I turned 19. This stuff keeps me up at night. I'm hyper alert to sounds and am extremely paranoid at night, especially when I'm alone. These pieces of shit impacted my life in such a way that they'll never know. But through it all, my siblings have remained so close. And my brother is super badass for stepping up and caring for us the way he did. He still tries to this day to be our protector, though we've all grown up. I now realize what's important is that none of us were hurt because it would have gone so terribly wrong in so many ways. I wonder if that guy would have come in, and I also wonder what those loser guys are doing now that they're in their 50s. Regardless, I hope I never see them again, because I may just kill them. It was February 2010 and I was 7 years old. My mom would let me walk home from school as my apartment was just a little ways from the school. There was never any problem with this, but one day when I was walking home from school, a black car pulled up next to me. For the life of me, I can't remember what kind of car it was. The window to the car rolled down and there was a woman with red hair. She looked to be around 45. She introduced herself as Erica and said that she was my father's sister. My father left before I was born and we don't have any contact with his family. Although I didn't know much about my father at the time, I did know that he only had brothers because just days before I was asking my mom rapid-fire questions about him, and one of them was if he had any brothers or sisters. Anyway, instead of telling Erica that he didn't have any sisters or just walking away, I told her my name and she started asking me questions like, "Where do you guys go to school?" and "How's your brother?" I got really creeped out by these questions and told her that I wasn't supposed to be talking to strangers, and started walking away. She continued to drive slowly next to me and kept saying that she means no harm, and I got scared and then eventually started running, and she followed me. When I got into my apartment complex, I ran up to my neighbor's house, acting like it was mine, because that's what my brother told me to do if I was ever being followed home. I looked back when I was at the door and she was driving away. I didn't tell my mom because I didn't want her to stop letting me walk alone. The next day, it happened again, but this time she offered me a ride. I told her no and to leave me alone, and once again I started running over to the neighbor's house, and once again she followed me. I still did not tell my mom. The next day was Saturday, and when I was playing at the basketball court with my brother, I saw the car drive by and I dragged my brother inside, telling him that I felt sick. On Sunday after church, on the way home, in the car pulling into the complex, I saw her outside. She was not in her car. I remember that she had a big stomach and smaller legs. I got scared, and when we got out of the car, I ran inside and looked out the living room window while my mom and brother went to make lunch. I saw her walk over to the neighbor's house, which I ran to. A few moments later, she walked away, and my neighbor came over to our house and informed my mother that a lady came looking for me, claiming that she was a teacher and needed to talk to me about something. When my mom heard this, she called me in, and I started crying, and I told her everything. And then she started crying because she was scared of what could have happened. And then she told me that I had to wait for my brother, who was 13, to get out of school so we could walk together. And she also reported this to the police. I and my neighbor had to give a report. After this, I saw the car and would point it out to my brother, and we would tell my mom. It all died down by April, and we never got any word about if the police ever talked to her. I didn't see her for years, and I forgot about it until yesterday when I was at Albertsons with my best friends. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was her. She introduced herself again, and my mouth just hung open in shock. And I acted nice, but when she offered to take me to my house, I got scared, grabbed my friend, and walked away. I'm very afraid. She remembers me. She still tried to give me a ride, and she's still around. I already told my mom. We aren't sure what to do. If you're looking for something better than a "he looked at me and it was creepy" story, well, here you are. This whole situation started when I was a sophomore in high school. I showed up to school one day and noticed a new boy in class. I was your atypical goth girl, and this guy was a teenage bad boy dream. Piercings, a leather jacket, reading some sort of obscure novel. I was hooked at first sight. I introduced myself, and soon enough we were dating. He will be referred to as X for the rest of the story. Now, a little background. I was brought up in an alcoholic parent's home. There were many times I was living by myself or with a friend because my parent was in the hospital. Despite the chaos in my life, I still managed to go to school every day and pull through decent enough grades. After one time too many, however, I was left for 2+ months living alone. Instead of coming home to an empty house, I asked my ex if I could live with him since he was closer to school. He and his parents happily welcomed me into their home. At this point in the relationship, maybe 5 months in, we were phasing out of the puppy love stage, and I was starting to notice some serious red flags. My ex was very mental, and his parents were very heavy drug users. There would be times when I would try talking to my ex, and he would literally stare off into space and not notice my existence. He was never mean or abusive towards me, but I could definitely tell something was unhooking in him. When we started living together, it started to become very evident that something was very, very wrong. He started to tell me he thought he was possessed by a demon and couldn't control himself. We both spiraled into moderate drug use. I started skipping school, and he started seeing more demons. In all truth, I hadn't realized what a hole I had dug myself into by living with him. One night, we ended up falling asleep after smoking a bowl of weed and watching a movie. It was a big house, and we were living in the garden-level basement, 2 or so floors below his parents and siblings. Around midnight, I was awakened by the most frightening screech I've ever heard. My ex was right next to me in bed, contorting, convulsing, and screaming bloody murder. At first, I thought it was a seizure. I've had friends with seizures before and didn't interfere, only looking for one of our cell phones to call 911. I got up out of bed, and he looked me dead in the eye. The blood drained from my veins. Never have I seen such hate. Everything seemed to happen in flashes from there. Never broke eye contact as he slowly rose from his bed. It almost looked as if he were a marionette on a set of strings pulled up with sunken shoulders. A half smile formed on his face and his body twitched. He started walking towards me. I can't describe how terrified I was, cornered in the room opposite the door. I felt my ears swell and ring. He started screeching at me, coming within a centimeter of my face, never breaking his gaze. I started pushing him, yelling at him to cut it out, but it was like trying to push a stone statue. He would not move. He finally started talking, ranting about the demon and not making a single word of sense. As bizarre as it was, I knew he was having some sort of mental episode. I truly did fear for my life, and I needed to escape. Suddenly, I felt as if I was sucked back into the moment, and my senses were incredibly acute. I noticed the window we had cracked open earlier. I pushed the window back, punched through the screen, and climbed out as he stood silently staring after me. I'm pretty sure I stayed outside for an hour, hyperventilating, before I decided to ring the doorbell. One of his parents answered, very confused, and set me up with a blanket on the couch on the first floor with no questions asked at all. In the morning, my ex came up and acted as if nothing had happened. No matter how much I pestered him about it, it was as if it had been a bad dream. I made arrangements to stay with another friend that day and broke up with my ex a week later, once I was actually able to face him again. Sometimes I wonder if it had been some sort of sick joke to get me out of his house or out of the relationship, but I watched unshocked in the years after as he fell into severe drug abuse and mental illness. At one point, I went to a school counselor and told him how worried I was for him, but it only made him hold a grudge against me. After everything had happened, I really started to feel sorry for him and sort of weirdly forgave him for what he did. He tried contacting me a few times after everything that happened, but as the years went by, I heard less and less. Last I heard, he was addicted to meth and living on the streets. I grew up in the middle of farmland and a large 1800s Victorian home. Given its history, there have always been several shacks and barns that once belonged to the builder of this house. There is a highway that sees maybe 3 cars on it during the night, and directly across from said highway, about 200 feet inward of a cornfield, is a shack that I have always found very creepy. As kids, I and my friends would dare each other to go inside and look, which always ended up with us going as a team. Nothing scary was ever found. Maybe a few broken glasses, metal piles, and miscellaneous items. There was no electricity or any sort of utility that made it homely. Years go by and the existence of the shack becomes a part of my daily life. However, one particular night, as I was watching TV, I noticed a light going off and on outside of my window. After getting startled, I dismissed it as passing cars simply more frequent than they typically are. An hour passes, it's nearing midnight, and the light stays on. This time I know for sure it's coming from outside. My family was asleep, but being my pansy 16-year-old self, I needed confirmation. Too bad for me, nobody wants to go check it out, so I go alone. I grabbed my pocket knife and a flashlight, the best I could think of with my shaken thoughts, and took off into the night. As I neared the highway, the light turned off, almost making me choke on air, but I had to figure out what the heck was going on. I make it to the entrance of the shack, which has no door, and slowly begin to enter, my flashlight scanning the room for any sign of life. What happened next, I'll never forget. 5 feet away from me, there's an old tattered recliner facing away that my father had tossed in there for future disposal. I shined my light on it because I knew I'd seen it rock ever so slightly. As I did that, a man stood up from the recliner, saying absolutely nothing. All I could tell was that he was middle-aged and wearing a jacket of sorts. Before I could process what was happening, I was already sprinting across the road and praying he wasn't behind me. It felt like years before I could make it to my door, but as I am about to make it into safety, I decide to look back. He was standing in the road completely still, with no words whatsoever. It's been 7 years since then. The shack still stands. The recliner remains in place. My dad never believed me. I wish somebody could share the dread that I had when I realized the recliner was facing a window, which was directed straight at my house. Two weeks ago, my mom started getting deliveries from a local flower shop with cryptic messages and has no idea who they're coming from. And then today, something else happened. The first, which came a couple of weeks ago, was a bouquet with a note. Do these smell better? She asked her boyfriend, and she said he didn't order anything and was equally as weirded out as her that she was receiving flowers from a total stranger. Not to mention the weird note with no context. She had no idea who it would be from or what the note meant. Do these flowers smell better than what? Because there was no context, and it sounded like some kind of inside joke that she was supposed to understand, but she had no idea what they were referring to. She mentioned it to my dad and her close friends too. It wasn't them either. She called the flower shop, and they said they weren't allowed to disclose who it came from and wouldn't give her any information, so it wasn't like it was just a promo thing from the shop to get business. Yesterday, she texted me while I was at work and said she just received another bouquet with chocolates and another note. White, blue, red, and green buttons falling from a tree. Typos are included, not that it matters. At least the first note made half sense. This one was just weird as heck. Then today something else happened. Without being specific, obviously my mom has the same last name as a historical figure. She just got a random Amazon package, opened it, and it was a book about that same historical figure called Have You Heard of Blank? It was a kid's book. I and my brother are both adults, so there's no reason for anyone to send this as a gift, and we have different last names anyway. I'm a female in my 20s who recently moved back in with my mom and my brother for financial reasons, to get back on my feet and pay for my divorce after the lease for my place was up. My brother works the night shift, so it's only me and my mom in the house at night, which is when I am the most worried about something happening. I can't think of any reason why somebody would be doing this without saying anything, unless they're just a creep, and we can't think of anyone who would do this as a prank. The first one was strange, but we kind of brushed it off, thinking it wouldn't happen again. The second one yesterday makes it even more creepy, and the random book today made both of us even more uneasy. It's one thing to send flowers, but whoever it was went out of their way to get a random Amazon book with her last name on it. I'm really weirded out now, knowing there's nothing we can really do but wait and see if something happens again, or if things get creepier. I feel helpless, and the thought of us being at home alone at night freaks me out. I know nothing has actually happened, but I just don't feel safe. If the person doing this has ill intentions, they know where we live. Her boyfriend stays at the house on the weekends. He stays with his kids during the week, so I feel a lot safer when he's here. But during the week, it's just us. Other than that, I have no idea who it is or why they're doing this. So this happened over the span of around a year when I was 15 to 16. I'm 20 now, and it has only recently been revealed to me how messed up this situation really was. I was obviously still living at home at the time, but my sister, who is 7 years older than me, had moved out and was living with her now husband, their high school best friend, and some other dude they met via one of those find a roommate sites. He was kind of the reclusive nerdy type, much preferring to hide in his room watching Star Trek and playing computer games than to actually hang out with the roommates, and the only person he ever really seemed to want to be around was his similarly shy and nerdy girlfriend. For a little context to the story, at the time this happened, he was 28 and she was 24. They were both a little weird, but initially seemed entirely harmless. For ease of telling this story, I sometimes might refer to these people as FR, who's the friendly roommate, WR, who's the weird roommate, and his weird girlfriend, who'll be WGF. Now, my sister and I have never really had the best relationship with our parents, and at this point, things were especially rocky. Our mother was dating a guy who was, to put it kindly, an abusive sack of shit who seemingly loathed me and would find any excuse to go off of me. As a result, I spent a lot of time staying over at my sister's place. It was around the time I spent a lot of time there that WR and WGF started to get really strange. As I said earlier, the pair of them were always kind of odd. They only ever seemed to want to speak to each other and would even go so far as to ignore anyone else who spoke to them. WGF was way worse than WR for this by a mile. He would at least give you monosyllabic responses most of the time. She had a kind of creepy habit of just blankly staring at you for a couple of seconds and then walking away if you asked her a question or tried to engage her in the conversation at all. This isn't the really weird behavior though. When I would stay over, I'd sleep on a futon in FR's office space, which was on the ground floor. It happened to be next to the downstairs bathroom, which for some reason WGF vastly preferred to the upstairs one. She would take long showers in the middle of the night, which is whatever. I'm a pretty heavy sleeper and she wasn't a shower singer or anything like that, so I generally slept right through them. One night, however, I stayed up mega late doing revision and homework, and happened to be awake after she finished her shower. I was too absorbed in my desk to really pay any attention to anything else, but I definitely noted hearing the shower shut off because that was my indicator of how damn late it really was. Approximately 10 minutes later, I look up from my laptop and there she is. I always kept the door open just a crack because that room tended to get unbearably hot if I didn't. And she was standing there outside the room, butt-ass naked, watching me through the open crack in the door. I said her name and asked if she was okay, which seemingly startled her because she walked away pretty sharply. I convinced myself that I'm over-caffeinated, sleep-deprived state, that I'd imagined the whole thing and didn't mention it to anyone. Fast forward about a month and I head over to my sister's one night to find FR kind of agitated about what he perceives to be a peeping Tom problem. He found fingerprints on the outside of his office window in such a way that would imply someone had been pressing up against the glass and looking in. The blind in this room was slightly too small for the window, so you could see in from the outside if you looked through the sides, and the room was on the front of the house and the window was easily accessible from the street. He became concerned that some random passing pervert had been spying on him while he was having a private moment, so to speak, in his office, or else some potential burglar had been sizing up the joint. The police were called, but as they didn't have any external CCTV at this point, no evidence could be provided and ultimately not a lot could be done. To combat this escalating further, FR installed both internal and external CCTV on the house. This was installed while WR and WGF were away on a holiday, and I guess everybody just forgot to tell them about it. Another couple months later, I go to my sister's to find WR's room empty, and I'm informed that he has moved out. Of course, I asked why, and I was informed simply that he and WGF were a pair of freaking creeps, and the others had collectively decided to kick them out. Apparently, her watching me through the office door was not a one-time incident. The CCTV footage showed that she regularly made a habit of standing and watching me through the cracked door, sometimes for as long as 20 to 30 minutes. I was just usually asleep when she did it. Not only that, but the fingerprints in the window had quite apparently been from WR standing outside and watching me after I'd showered and was hanging out in just a towel, which was a less regular occurrence, but apparently was caught on camera enough times for it to be concerning. As if that wasn't weird enough in and of itself, I was recently hanging out with my sister and her husband, and he passed a comment about how he wishes they told me the full story at the time so I could have chosen to press charges. I asked what he meant by that, and he revealed that not only had they both been secretly watching me, but The CCTV also showed that they also messed with my food and stuff that I bought, including clips of him licking all of my apples, her spitting my orange juice, and even dumping regular cow's milk into my lactose-free stuff, which explained why I had a period of feeling really sick from nowhere. To top it all off, apparently when FR barged into their room to confront them about it, he not only found that several shirts I thought I'd misplaced elsewhere had been stolen by the two of them and literally hung up on their wall, but also that she had done several drawings of me sleeping and written a poem called Ode to My Name, which contents I don't know and I don't really want to know. Apparently FR gave them an ultimatum of, "You have 2 hours to get the heck out of this house and never contact Gingerbread Bloke or any of us again, or I'm calling the police." And they took the former option. They've never tried to contact me subsequent to this, but I feel sick thinking of what they were potentially planning. Here in South Africa, we're in lockdown right now. I meant to travel for work to Santa Barbara, but since we're under lockdown, we can't go anywhere. So I'm an entrepreneur with a tech startup here, and since I travel mostly, I make use of the Regis co-working space for a hot desk or meeting room. It's quite flexible. There's always coffee and pretty girls coming in and out. Since COVID-19 broke out, however, I saw Regis as a public or corporate office, with many people coming in and out. Therefore, I was now stuck with no office. A buddy of mine told me he has an entire unused area at his house behind some offices. I would be alone and I'd have my own kitchen, lounge, TV, bathroom, etc. The only catch, I would have to park on the road. So let me explain the way the road is. It's a wide, steepish road with a massive park and zoo on the left, with 3 entrances and parking and houses and businesses on the right. I use this road quite often to go to Florida Road, a popular bar and food district. There are only streetlights on the houses and businesses side, as there was a red line or no parking line alongside the road on the right and left. I had to park outside the park, so I parked in the first parking nearest to the building I was working at. This story takes place one night before the lockdown. I had a call with a company in Denver, Colorado, which I had to start at 6 p.m. South African Standard Time. It went well and I decided to pack up and leave. I wore formal shoes and carried my laptop on my back. Being paranoid, before I left, I looked on the CCTV before opening the gate. I didn't see anyone inside. I then proceeded to buzz myself out, lock up, and walk out. I don't know how, but in the time it took me to walk from the building to the gate, a man appeared. He seemed drunk or high and was just hanging around against the fence on the side of the road my car was on, wearing a hooded sweatshirt with a hoodie down, torn brownish jeans and sneakers. I started walking and looked down, keeping track of him from the corner of my eye. Mine was the only car left, so I would assume he knew that was mine. As I got closer to my car, I noticed him starting to walk out toward me. I ignored him. He was still walking diagonally, trying to cut me off. He then said, as he was maybe 5 meters away, "Let me help you with your bag, Lonnie, sir." Now I had a comfortable laptop backpack on. I was walking hands-free, and yet he asked to help me with my bag. South Africa, car guards usually help you with your grocery bags and accept a 5 or 10 ZAR tip, but not this guy. This guy knew what I was doing, where I was going, and what I was carrying. To make matters worse, he had left his hand in his hoodie pocket and was now walking faster. It all went down in a split second. He suddenly lunged at me, but being a football player, I feigned left and went right. In that split second I thought, if I ran to my car, which was still another 10 to 15 meters away, I would have surely not made it. I am fast, but fumbling with my keys, opening the door, and getting in, I didn't seem confident. So I made the decision of jumping the fence into the now dark park. I made it with one leap over, albeit slower since my backpack kept bouncing on my back. As soon as I hit the ground, I took my laptop bag off, held it in my hand, and ran. I looked for a dark spot to hide, so I ended up behind a massive tree in the park. There were a few of them, but it was the only one that didn't have a light hitting on it. I heard him running and slurring his words and saying something like, "Bitch, just give me the bag." So my car was on the other side of a tennis court. If I could get to the tennis court, sneak around that, and run to my car, I could make it. But there was a lit open space between this tree and the tennis court, and he was running straight through that space. I watched the angle of him running and slowly rounded the tree to keep myself out of his line of sight. I honestly think him being high helped me immensely here, as he ran straight past and toward the other side of the park. When he was a distance away, which couldn't have been more than 20 meters, I made a break for it. Not being quiet now, I pushed away every branch and leaf, which he heard, and he turned around and saw. I burst around the tennis court, stupid because I should have just gone back the way I came. I turned around and saw him yelling and running back at me, stumbling every now and then but picking up the pace, and actually gaining on me. He had a knife, and it was out now. I puffed my way up the hill, opened the car, and jumped in. I locked the door with my laptop on my lap and started my car. When I looked back at the darkness, he was gone. He must have slunk back into the park when I was out of range. But where? I didn't want to find out. I skated and drove the heck out of there. I won't say I won't work there again. I would, but maybe I'll Uber next time. So this happened over a decade ago. Our oldest son, Caden, was 3 at the time, and our youngest son, Connor, was around 5 months. It still gives me chills and still makes me uncomfortable even walking by it. It was a January evening in Pennsylvania. It was dark outside with a couple inches of snow on the ground. We had just finished eating dinner, and I planned on giving our little one a bath. My husband drives a truck for work, so he isn't home very often. It's just me and the boys during the week. Caden was playing in his toy room that has a door leading to the side deck. We have no sensor light or even a porch light on that whole side of the house. At this time, we didn't use the deck at all, only to use our grill on it during the summer months. It is not close to the sidewalk or the street over. It's basically an open space of yard off that deck. Anyway, Caden was playing in the toy room, waiting for his turn to take a bath, while I brought Connor into the bathroom. We were just about done with the bath when I heard Caden's little feet running towards the bathroom. He stands in the doorway and says, "Mom, there's a man looking in the side door. I think it's the mailman." My heart skipped a beat because 1, no mailman is coming at 7 p.m. and 2, the side door as he called it was never used, especially not in the winter. 3, I didn't hear anybody knock. I began to sketch myself out more by thinking about how there was no light on the deck, and this person would have to walk through the yard in the snow, walk up the back stairs of the deck, and go to that door when the front porch light was on and attached to a shoveled sidewalk. I took Connor out of the bath, put him in a towel in his chair, and told Caden to sit with his brother and not to come out until I said it was okay. He was confused but listened and just kept asking what was wrong. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, had 911 ready to call, and got my mama bear face on. When I walked to the side door, I shined the flashlight on my phone through the window of the door at a distance, walking up to it to hopefully scare someone away. It is made mostly of glass. The worst thought with this as a mother is that as I reached for the handle, I realized it was unlocked. Somebody could have walked right in. I flung the door open, shined my light, held up my knife, and yelled, "Hey," in the most threatening voice a 5'4", 120-pound woman could make. There were footprints in the snow up the deck stairs and back down going into the field and woods behind our house. I slammed the door, thoroughly freaked out, and locked it. I called the police and waited in the bathroom with the boys. While I was in there, I asked Caden, "Do we know who the man was?" He said, "No, but he smiled and waved at me for a long time," which freaking haunts me still. I asked him what he was wearing. He told me he had a hat that looked like the mailman's, and he wasn't wearing a coat. That's all I could get out of him. A police officer came and searched the property with flashlights before coming inside. He asked me and Caden questions and then informed me that he not only saw footprints leading up to the side deck, but also to the outside door to our basement and kitchen window on the other side of the house as well. He suggested I have somebody come and stay with us for the night, and they will continue to follow the footprints that were left in the snow back to the field and wood line. My father-in-law slept on the couch that night with his gun being the closest relative to our house. My mother was a nervous wreck and I got very little sleep that night and never heard back from the police. I'm guessing tracks were lost through the bit of woods. Caden still mentions it from time to time randomly, and we got a blackout curtain for that door. I'd still very much like to get better locks to be safe. My husband and my father think it might have been a man who saw me home alone while passing and wanted to hopefully sneak a peek. But why just stand there and watch my child and go around the whole back of the house, not by the front door or street?